Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. It's a real pleasure to be a speaker at this event. So, thank you, Richmond, for the invitation as well. The name of this presentation is Learning Analytics Using Data to Inform Our Pedagogic Decisions. So, First of all, I'm Lilian Montalva from Brazil, and I'm a materials writer and a teacher educator here. And I have worked in EOT for almost 20 years now. Okay, um, to begin with, I think it is important to say that we are living data driven times because of all the digital technologies available. And data is produced and collected nonstop, right? As we use digital technologies. And it is actually used for various purposes. We can even question some of them because of privacy reasons, but this is not within the scope of this presentation. And what happens now is that, and that's why I chose this image to start this presentation, is that we leave digital footprints everywhere. So it's almost as if we had a digital DNA and we left traces of this DNA behind every time we use digital devices. So I think it helps to think about data this way, because when we start talking about data in the context of education, this will make sense to you as well. So this is the agenda for today. I'm going to talk a little more about these data-driven times that we're living in. Then I'm going to tell you a little story that happened. And I named it "The Day Data Saved the Day" or the Year. Then I'll talk about data science in education and the relationship between this topic and the Richmond Learning Platform. As I said, we're living data driven times, and data collection and use, they happen all the time in our daily routine. So, these are two screenshots that I took from my own Instagram account. So, when we think about social media, for example, Instagram, and we check the status, the stats, and we see how many likes we had and how many people shared our content, how many people left comments, and we check all of that. That was data collected by the platform, right? The same happens when we see sponsored ads on social media. So this is another example from my own account. I just saw this sponsored ad about creating doodle videos. And how does that happen? Well, the platform collects data according to the way that I use the platform itself, the kind of things that I look for, the kind of things that I like, that I share, that I interact with. And then there's some kind of artificial intelligence involved that gathers everything and then starts showing us things that we may be interested in. Here's another really simple example. These are Google Maps timelines. So if we use Google Maps, it will be collecting data from us. So here we can see, for example, a specific day in my routine, and I can actually track back everything that I did on that day. And if I took a bus, or if I went on foot or by car or any other means of transportation. On the one on the right, you can see even the types of transportation that I have used in April, and the kilometers, so the distance that I have gone using those means of transportation. That is also used to offer us products, services, and all of that. Um, and this is another really classic example about sponsored ads. So I was actually doing some research about cookies in technology, and you can see on top of the screen, you can see ads because I had searched previously for some hair products, and then they started showing. You've probably seen that many times. So this is one very common use of data, and there's not much that we can do about it, right? Um, but then we have data in education. So it doesn't have to be that bad, right? There's good use of data as well. So I'd like to tell you a really short story. This was back in 2020. It was the beginning of emergency remote teaching, the beginning of those very tough and rough days. And in my teaching context, at the time, I had 7 groups of second graders, so a huge number of students. When we started the first phase of remote teaching, we were 100% asynchronous because we needed time to like settle down and see exactly what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, because in the beginning nobody knew actually if that was going to last 2 weeks, 2 months, and it ended up lasting almost 2 years, right? So I remember, I think these were the very 2 first weeks of remote teaching. I felt completely in the dark because I had to create asynchronous content for my second graders. They were 6 to 7 at the time. But I wouldn't see them. I wouldn't meet with them online at that point. So I was just at some point I was like, but how will I know if they're actually engaging with the activities? How will I know what is going on with them? They're so young. And everybody was so busy trying to figure out what to do. So not even admin knew exactly what to do. And we used an LMS, a learning management system, which was not, let's say, user friendly. It's amazing because it has lots of possibilities, but it was not very user friendly. But I just started like taking a look at it. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. And I accidentally found reports. I found data on the students, all my students, including like if they had ever accessed the platform, when they did it, when was the last time they did it, um, exactly which activities they had done, and even the time, the date and the time. So I was like, wow, this is precious. And then there was the day that I figured out that some students had never accessed the platform, and that was really concerning because like things were already messy enough, and we just couldn't afford not helping those students. And then that was the first part of the story. Okay, so I have this information. It was data that I found on the platform. But like, okay, now what do I do? What do I do now? So what I decided to do was give all those names to my coordinators and tell them to contact the families, because we needed to know what was going on, why they were not actually using the platform. And the answers were quite surprising. So we had multiple reasons. So inefficient internet services, families, we hadn't considered that in the very beginning. Families of like 4 people, 5 people sharing one computer, because the parents were also working from home in many situations, in many cases. Lack of knowledge about how to use the platform, because it was not, like I said, a user friendly platform. And even things like divorced parents, so they were completely lost, because one week the kid was with mom and then the next week with dad, and you can imagine how complex that was. But it was only because of the data that we found that it was possible to know that something was wrong and to act before it was too late. So this is one, I think, of the possibilities of data, of using data in education, preventing problems, right? And then when we moved to phase two, we had kind of a blended learning model. So we had synchronous classes and asynchronous studies in like a flipped classroom model. But then we had data already, and we knew we could anticipate some of these issues. And also our IT department started working on that, so that students and families could also keep track of their progress. So they started improving the platform, so that we didn't have to just go there like every week and check who was actually doing the activities or not. Students could also do that, and families could also do that. Um, and then, but then, full disclosure. Because I named my story "The Day Data Saved the Day or the Year," but it wasn't actually data that saved the year, right? It was the decisions that we made based on the data that we collected. So, in most cases in education, data will indicate that something is wrong or not going as expected, and we can consider that as our what. So, data will show us the what is going wrong. But we need to find the why. So, why is that happening? We need to figure out why. And also, our how. Okay, how can we fix this? How can we overcome this problem? Right? So, data alone is not enough. We need a lot more than that. So, data is part of the puzzle, but data is not the whole puzzle, right? Because we know as educators that this is a very, very complex field. There's a lot of other aspects involved and a lot of things that can't be measured, that can't be actually collected by a computer. Thank God. But yes, data can help. So let's learn how it can help us. As I said, so data can be considered our what. Okay, so computers and artificial intelligence can do that, but the why and the how rely mostly on the people involved. In this case, us educators. And when I say educators, it's everyone involved in education, right? Teachers, admin, everyone who works in education, I consider as an educator. So it's everyone's responsibility. So now let's begin taking a look at how data science can be used in education. So we need to first of all understand what data science is. So I brought this quote. So it is the field of study that combines domain expertise, programming skills, and knowledge of mathematics and statistics to extract meaningful insights from data. And I even highlighted this part because this phrase is key, right? There's no point in just collecting data and keeping it there, leaving it there. That's not enough. So we need to interpret data, translate it, so we can actually make decisions based on that. And then when it comes to education, we have something called learning analytics, which is actually the title of this talk. So, what is that? It's the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their contexts for purposes of understanding and optimizing learning and the environments in which it occurs. So, again, I have highlighted a few bits here. So analysis, because again, data won't just take care of itself. It needs us to analyze it, and reporting of data. So, okay, so I have analyzed it. Now I need to know what this is saying so that I can actually decide what I'm going to do about it, right? And the purpose is always to understand and optimize learning or learning environments. And this is a long quote, but I have decided to keep it this way because, well, as teachers, we have actually always collected information about our students, right? Like homework, assignments, tests, all of that. But in the past, we had to do it like on our own, either in a notebook or we would create our own spreadsheets on a computer. So it was a lot more time consuming. So now this part can be done by computers. So we can actually use our time wiser, more wisely in this sense. Okay, but then why? Why should we use data to inform pedagogic decisions? So I have begun talking about that already. It's time saving compared to uh, the workload. If we think about the workloads that teachers have, so it's time saving because the computer can do it. And then we can concentrate on other processes that actually require our reflection and action. We can see data as an X-ray of classes and of individual students. We can use it to track students' participation, performance, and progression. It can provide evidence about the effectiveness of teaching strategies. And then, just a remark here, I'm not saying that data is always going to provide evidence about the effectiveness of teaching strategies, but it may, right? Because it's more complex than that. And also, it helps us personalize learning experiences because um, it helps us see problems earlier and identify problems better so we can actually personalize experiences to optimize learning. And then I have here this suggested cycle for educators. So this can be the teacher or teacher and admin or a team, a whole team of teachers. It really depends on each context. So it's a 5-step cycle. So number one would be collect data and then some suggested questions at this phase. Which type of data is most relevant now? Because we can have all sorts of data collected by an LMS, for example. How can I or we collect it? Okay, is it data from the LMS that I have, or do I need something else, something that maybe the LMS won't provide me with? And then I'll have to create something like on Google Forms, for example, or Microsoft Forms. Um, in phase two, analyze and interpret data. So, suggested question here: what may it be telling me about the student, the class, the learning experience? Phase three, reflect upon the interpretation. Okay, what can I do about it? What could I do about it? Phase four, set new objectives and define actions. And number five, implement actions. And then, because this is a cycle, we start a new cycle every time we implement new actions. So, this is a suggested cycle for using learning analytics to optimize learning. Okay. And then when we have an LMS like the Richmond Learning Platform, the collection of data is facilitated, as you will see now. You're probably familiar with the platform, so I'm not going to go into much detail. But let's say that all in all, what the platform does is it collects data every time students use it. And it is able to generate reports, valuable reports containing graphs and tables. And these graphs and tables, they enable us to track individual and class engagement and performance. And then they have a series of materials available, right? So we can see reports divided by materials, so self-study materials, assignments, tests. And we can also track individual and class performance in the language area. And that's going to be divided into grammar, vocabulary, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So we can actually have access to a lot of data in the Richmond platform. I'm not going to go into a lot of details here. So this first part is about average score reports. So as you can see here, um, you can generate reports and see graphs that will show you the average of students' either engagement or performance in self-study materials, assignments, tests, and we even have the combined average. And I have highlighted here, you can see we have two possibilities. We have class reports, so you can actually have the class average for each one of these categories, but you can also check student by student. So at the bottom here, we've got student reports. So you can actually see how each student is doing in each one of those categories. And you've probably noticed that one of the graphs is yellow. So that is an indication already, a visual indication that maybe there's something there that we should look deeper into. So those graphs, they can also be turned into spreadsheets, so Excel files, and downloaded, just like the one you see on the screen, as well as PDFs. Okay, and the same, you can have the class reports or the individual reports being downloaded as PDFs, because depending on the use that we're going to do of the data, it might be helpful to have them as PDFs or Excel files. Then we have the language area report. So that's how we can see how students are doing in terms of grammar, vocabulary, listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Uh, Again, we have class reports on top of the report, on top of the screenshot, sorry, and student reports, individual student reports at the bottom. So here, in this example, in the class report, so this is how the class is doing. I can see that productive skills, speaking and writing, for example, they require some attention and possibly some action, as you can see in the percentages. So, what should I do in this case? I would need to take a closer look at those to understand what is going on, right? So, I look at the data says, okay, there's something wrong here, so I have to dig deeper to actually know why that is happening and what students need in order to make progress in those areas. So, some of the questions that I can ask myself, some examples. Um, did many students do badly in these tests? Who are these students? What is their profile in terms of engagement with materials and assignments, both in the platform, in the online environment, but also in the face to face classes? What could have impacted their performance? Maybe they didn't have enough practice. So I have to think about all of these possibilities. How do these students normally do in class? Are they active, participative? Um, does that reflect how they participate in class, or no, that's a total surprise? Okay, so it's the moment we actually dig deeper. So we have like I said, we have like the digital footprints, and we have to actually understand what's behind those footprints. The same for the individual reports. We also have the possibility of generating reports about the test scores, so course specific test reports. And this is interesting because we can actually track progress between tests. So in this example that you can see, we have unit test 1 and unit test 2. So we can see how the class progressed in terms of grammar, listening, reading, speaking, vocabulary, and writing. So each one of these lines represents one of the skills or the criteria. And then we can see if there was progress or not, or if it's stable. Here it's the same, but we also have the student reports as well. So we can see student by student. We also have diagnostic test reports, and this is really interesting. So, uh, this example is the entrance diagnostic test report, because students take an entrance test, and then there's also an exit diagnostic test, but they look the same and the graphs look the same. And this is really interesting because many times when we have a new class of students, we can see that we have students at different levels of proficiency. We can see that that is a multi-level group. This is actually very common when it comes to language learning. So we may have like A1 plus, A2, A2 plus, all in the same group. But sometimes it is really hard to tell at which level students are, and like what the percentage of, let's say, A2 students in this class is. But when they take the diagnostic test and we see this report, we can see in percentages, in numbers. Okay, so what's the percentage of A2 students, A1 plus, A2 plus, as you can see in the pie chart? And why is that helpful? Okay, if I am, let's say, I'm teaching A2 level, and then I have, let's say, 40% of my students in the beginning of the year are actually A1 plus. Maybe I'll need to do some more work there, right, to help them catch up and actually reach the A2 level. So that's a really nice indicator as well, really useful. And again, we can also see the student reports, not only class reports, but student reports. And we have bar graphs too with the skills. We also have the Richmond International Practice Test Report. So these are like mock tests, I believe. And as you can see here in this example, we've got the parts of the test, the international practice test, like listening, reading, writing, use of English, reading and use of English, reading and writing. And then we can also see the same. We can see progress. We can see how they're doing, how the class is doing in terms of each one of the test papers. We can have, oops, again, individual student reports also for this case. For self-study materials, we can also see how students are doing, so their level of commitment, their progress, and this is actually something useful to share with students as well, because well, we want them to develop autonomy, right? We want them to be committed and responsible learners. So if a student is doing really badly and we need to have a conversation with that student, if we have collected all this data and we have analyzed it, we can actually show it to the student, like, take a look, you have actually done only 50% of your assignments. Why do you think that is happening? What kind of difficulties are you having? How can I help you? It's a lot easier to take action. In this example, there is a column that is see your progress. So that's really useful, as I said, to share with students so they can actually take responsibility for their own learning as well. Then we have assignment scores. So these are things that the teacher can assign several types of activities, and it's possible to upload activities as well. So we can easily see how many assignments were submitted. So we don't have to be counting like, oh, let's see if everybody in this class has turned in their assignment. No, the platform will do that for us. And generates other kind of data too, like the class average score, for example. This is for the individual students. Once again, test scores. We can see test by test as well. Same thing. Individual students. We can also look into the details of the scores that students got by checking the types of mistakes that they made. So we can actually decide what should be reinforced in our classes, right? What needs to be revised and reinforced. So it's an incredible amount of data. And we combine these pieces of data with what we observe daily in class, of course, because it's not only about data, it's not only about what happens in the virtual environment. There's also what happens in the face-to-face classes, and that's obviously extremely important. So when we combine these two, so our observations what goes on a daily basis and the data collected by the platform, we will have a more accurate picture of the students' profiles. So it's no longer just an impression, because sometimes we base our decisions on impressions, like I have the impression that, but it's based on evidence. So this is more solid and more reassuring for everyone involved, right? For the teachers, for administration, for families, and obviously for the students as well. So here I have some concluding remarks. So data can and should be used in education to optimize learning because of its potential to provide us with evidence about learning. So we shouldn't disregard that. It's there, it's available, let's use it. Data is one more tool available to educators. So this is important. It is a means and not an end in itself. educators remain the main decision makers, right? It's always us who are going to make the decisions, but we can count on data for that as a tool. And also important to say that not everything can be measured in education, because it is above all a social process. So it's a complex process. There are many aspects involved, and well, data will be one part of that, one aspect, right? But many things cannot be measured and will be observed, and the teacher will reflect upon that and discuss with peers and administration, and to make the best decisions. And well, that's all from my part. I know we will have Q&A now, but I would like to thank you once again for being here, for listening to this talk. I hope I have provided you with some useful insights that you can take to your educational contexts, and I'm willing to answer your questions now.
Lilian, it was a great presentation, and today you have helped us tremendously to understand the importance of collecting evidence in the teaching learning process. It is question time now, and here the first question. Julia from Bolivia is asking you, based on your professional experience, do you think data will continue saving the day when it comes to pedagogical decisions?
Oh, tough question. It's always difficult to talk about the future, right? Especially when things are changing so rapidly. Uh, I don't see a way back, actually. I don't see like how we would eventually stop using data to inform decisions in education. Um, what may happen in the future is that, um, well, maybe technology will get to a point when lots of the things that we have to do right now, in terms of analyzing all this data, maybe that will be faster in the future, or maybe um, computers will be able to do some of that, just like we already have with adaptive platforms. Like, so students are uh, doing certain activities, and then depending on their performance, they will be directed this way or that way. But yeah, no, honestly, I don't see a way back. I think data is here to stay as part of our processes.
Nice, wise words, Lilian. Data is here to stay. It is always a pleasure to hear from you and to learn such great ideas to enrich our teaching. We're thankful for your participation today.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here with us. It was a big pleasure, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.
We also thank Lilia Montalva for her great performance today.